Hi everyone, this is Katie and this is My Life with VEDS. Today I'm going to talk to you about why and how I started talking to my first responders about vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Before I continue with this video, if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, I would really appreciate it. Go ahead and just hit the subscribe button down below. To explain why I started doing this, I really need to take you back to what it was like when I was first diagnosed. Remember, my diagnosis came late. I was 28 years old, and there really was a delay in both my diagnosis of VEDS and an artery dissection because my doctors didn't really know about VEDS. They didn't know to look out for it, didn't know that I had it, and they also didn't know how to recognize it, really. They weren't familiar with it at all. Because of this, when I was first diagnosed, I really tried to set up some redundancies or safety nets because I figured in an emergency, it was unlikely that I would have somebody who knew what VEDS was. One of the first kind of safety nets that I tried to set up when I was first diagnosed with VEDS was something called a premise file. I don't know if they're called premise files everywhere, but where I lived at the time, it was called a premise file. A premise file, the way I understand it, is very basically a note on an address that lets first responders know something important about someone at that address. For me, I thought it would be really useful to have a note in my file at my address about VEDS. I thought it could say something like, Katie Wright lives at this address and she has a genetic condition that causes her arteries and organs to be prone to spontaneous rupture. In an emergency, consider these types of medical emergencies, ... So I had called the county I lived in and asked them about this premise file, and I spoke to somebody who kind of tried to discourage me from submitting this premise file request. She told me that most medical conditions really don't need a note in the file, like if I had diabetes or something, they know all about that. And I kind of reassured her that no, my condition is very rare. I know that not many physicians know about this condition, and I really would like a premise file application. So I got all the paperwork together and included details about my condition and information from the University of Washington about VEDS. A few weeks after submitting my premise file request, I received a letter in the mail that basically said that my premise file request was denied because the county medical examiner, whatever that role is, the person who decides, felt that the EMTs and paramedics were receiving constant new education, and they were confident that those responders would know about VEDS and be able to handle my situation in an emergency without a premise file. I was livid. And in my anger, fear, and disappointment, I decided I was going to take matters into my own hands since I didn't have the help that I thought I really needed. So I created a really loud sign for my door, figuratively loud. It didn't yell at anybody. But I created this big sign for my door that basically I felt no responder could miss if they had to show up at my door in an emergency. It had a big red medical alert symbol on it. It said my name. It said I have vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And actually, I'm just going to put a picture of it here. This is my very first door sign that I created out of really a lot of frustration. So I get used to having this door sign up on my front door, and later in the year, I have my first major mini stroke at 2:30 in the morning. I had had a previous mini stroke several months before, but it was very minor, and I didn't have a confirmation of my VEDS diagnosis. So when I went to the emergency room at that time, they never did a scan, and they basically just sent me home. This one that happened at 2:30 in the morning was very terrifying. I did a video about it right after it happened, really, from the hospital. And I also did a follow-up video a couple of years later about this whole experience because there were several that happened over a course of a year. I'll put a link to it here in the description if you want to go back and look at those. So it's 2:30 in the morning. I crawl across my bedroom to get the phone to call 911. And after a bit of a struggle with that, I finally get an operator and I get confirmation that help is on the way. Now, because this ended up being a TIA, a transient ischemic attack, and not a stroke that needed intervention, my symptoms really started resolving as the first responders were arriving. So I crawled to the front door to open the door for them, and then they helped me get on the couch, and then by the time they were taking my vitals and everything, my feeling was starting to come back into my leg and the room had stopped spinning and it was really a lot more manageable. As I told them where my emergency book was and they were reviewing it, There's one of them that was taking my blood pressure and two others that were kind of reviewing the book in terror about this condition. A couple EMTs arrived and they also walked in and said, "Hey, did you guys see the sign on the door? Have you ever heard of this condition?" And they said, "No, we're reading about it right now. This is insane." None of the 5 first responders in my apartment that morning had ever heard of VEDS, and all of them really were very grateful that I had information to give them about it. And then they asked me if I had considered getting a premise file. They told me that without the info that I had given them, they probably would have not taken my situation as seriously because I was so young, and when they arrived, everything was really resolving, so they might not have even believed what had happened. This ultimately is what inspired me to talk to first responders about VEDS. I have moved a couple times since then, and every time I make sure to talk to my local first responders. I typically bring some information to leave with them, and now there's this awesome new emergency preparedness kit from the VEDS movement that has a fact sheet for paramedics and EMTs as well. And every time I have gone to talk to first responders, it has been a really great conversation, and they're very receptive to the information and grateful that I am being proactive and giving them the info ahead of an emergency. I really think these amazing people are really a great chance at having a good advocate in an emergency when I can't advocate for myself. If there was some reason why I couldn't talk and give this information to somebody at the hospital if I arrive via ambulance, I feel like if the emergency responders have this information, they can pass it on. And so that was really what I had tried to accomplish when I started doing this, is a safety net, basically, to let other people know about my condition in case I can't. When I moved about 1.5 years ago, the station that I went to actually asked me to go to all of the stations in the area and do the same thing because they felt like it was so important. I usually start with the station closest to my house. And before, when I was not working from home full time, I did go to the station that was by my work. And when I had a gym membership, I went to the station that was by the gym as well. I am going to include a link to the new emergency preparedness kit from the VEDS movement in the description of this video down here. So I hope you check it out. I hope you find it useful, and I hope you find this video useful as well. I'll be posting new videos on Saturday afternoons. I have a list of topics that I know I'd like to talk about, but if there's something that you would like to hear me talk about, my experience with VEDS, please let me know. Put it in the comments section and I will look out for it. Again, if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, I'd really appreciate it. Just hit that subscribe button. It'll let you know when I have new videos about my life with VEDS. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.